When deciding whether or not you're going to apply for a new credit card, it is very important that you ask yourself a couple questions before you do so, especially if you're new in the credit card game. You don't want to apply for 12 credit cards in 1 year, get all of these points, and then not have a plan to use them. And once issuers like Chase or Amex stop giving you credit cards, you might be left with a credit card setup that doesn't really work for you on daily spend. So today I just want to go over a few things to think about in regards to applying for credit cards, especially if you are newer to the credit card game. So here are some questions to think about before getting into the game, or if you are already in the game, you can still think about these questions and see if they can kind of steer you in the right direction. The most important thing when deciding if you want to get into the credit card game is to consider your financial status. Do you have any debt right now? Is it credit card debt? Is it a car loan? Not all debt is created equal. If you have $10,000 of credit card debt right now, getting into the credit card game is the last thing I would suggest for you. Firstly, you should be budgeting every month, making sure you are making more money than you are spending, and buying that debt down. Once you are in a healthy financial status, then you can take a look into the credit card game. The credit card game is not some big boogeyman that some people like Dave Ramsey might say. It is a tool used by many to not only make money if you're in a cashback setup, but also make travel cheaper if you're more travel focused. These are not hard and fast rules, and different people might say different things, but if you don't have at least a 3-month emergency fund, focus on that before you apply for any credit cards. Some people might say they are not related, but there is a ton of literature out there suggesting that when you spend on a credit card, you are more likely to spend, whether that be in cash or a debit card. And while we like to think us in the credit card game are not overspending, we probably are, or if we're not, we're taking a ton of extra steps to make sure we are not doing that. So I would focus on making sure you are in a good financial situation before you even think to start applying for credit cards. Because if you're not in a good financial situation, you probably don't have a good credit score, and you probably couldn't get approved for many of the good credit cards, and you might be stuck with something from Credit One where you're paying an annual fee to get no points, and it's just terrible. So focus on your financial situation first. Once you are in a good spot, again, different people could consider what a good spot could be, whatever is a good spot to you. Once you're in that position, all right, let's start rolling. The next thing that you really need to consider is, do you like to travel? And what I mean by that is, are you someone who is trying to travel as much as possible? Or maybe are you a road warrior who takes maybe one road trip a year and you're not really concerned with, seeing every single country before you turn 40. This could really help determine whether or not you should be going for cashback cards or points and miles cards. I cannot make that decision for you, but you should really determine what kind of traveler you are. And hey, if you don't like traveling, just do cashback and you'll have the easiest setup possible. Find as many 5X cards as you can, and you have a pretty good setup. But if you do like traveling, you still have to have more considerations. How often are you traveling? Are you looking to travel the highest luxury possible once a year? Or are you trying to take 5 mini trips where you stay at a Days Inn or something like that? Are you more domestic traveling? Do you want to see all of the presidential grave sites like Douglas? Or do you want to go to the Maldives? Those are two completely different things, and they require two completely different strategies. You need to ask yourself all of these questions before you decide what kind of credit cards you want to get, or at least before you decide what your next credit card is going to be. I mentioned this previously in a video where I discussed the quality versus quantity travel aspect more in depth, but I developed this very scientific scale, the Douglas to Sebi scale. And just a brief highlight of what that is. Douglas Reports is a YouTuber who is great. You should definitely subscribe to his channel. But his mentality is that travel cannot affect the family budget. Travel must pay for itself, whether that be cashback, bank account bonuses, which is a whole other animal, or the points and miles must pay for it, for the travel. Nothing can affect his family bank account, which I think is a great way to think about things. You also have Ask Sebi, who is another awesome YouTuber who makes videos where he does a little bit more of that high-end traveling, and sometimes if their point availability isn't there, he will pay for it in cash. So again, who's someone who doesn't want to pay for anything versus someone who is willing to pay for luxury things. And again, that's very boiling those two people down into those two sentences. They definitely have some nuance there, but where do you fit in on this scale? And I think kind of determining where you are on this scale can also help you determine what kind of credit card setup might work for you. So as you see on that little squiggly line, I definitely am more of a Dugras than a Sebi. So for me personally, this is my checklist when taking a trip. I need at least my flight or my lodging to be free. And by free, I mean it must be on points. In my previous videos, I just talked about how free travel is definitely not free, but I want to make sure when I'm flying somewhere, the only thing I'm paying for is my taxes and fees, or if I can't find good point availability, I need my lodging to be free. One or the other at the bare minimum, or I will not take the trip. So example of that is I'm staying at a buddy's house, so I might pay for my flight, or I'm using Delta miles, so okay, I'll shell out some cash for a hotel. Ideally, I get both, and I don't have to pay any cash except for my taxes and fees, of course. But after flights and lodging, I am okay spending out of pocket for things like food, souvenirs, toys. Definitely stack some of that with Rakuten or some Capital One offers to kind of stack, my points and stack my rewards. But I do not mind spending cash on those things if I know my lodging and flight were on points. That makes me feel more comfortable spending, not unlimited, but not really considering the amount of cash I'm spending on the rest of those things because I already know I save so much money. And even if I spend a lot of money on food, it's not going to add up to too much by the end of the trip. Hopefully, at least. I also am someone where I don't need to fly business class, but internationally, I probably want to fly business class or at least some type of premium economy just to make sure that I am kind of a tall guy. My knees aren't what they used to be, as they say. And so I do want a little bit of luxury in my life. When it comes to hotels, I don't really care. But when it comes to a flight, I want to be as comfortable as possible. That's just me as a traveler. So I hope that kind of helps you understand where I'm coming from. This also influences what my credit card setup looks like. So what does my setup currently look like? Well, I am currently in my sign-up bonus hunting phase, which I'm not going to touch too much on because I think when you first start in the game, you should acquire the cards that you will use for the long term and then go sub hunting. I'm kind of in that step 2 of sign up bonus hunting. But if I were to stop sign up bonus hunting right now, what would my setup look like? Well, firstly, I would have some type of Delta card for status. Probably the reserve, but if that card doesn't seem to give its value as much, I might go down to the platinum. Again, that is something I am currently trying to decide because my travel in 2026 is going to look a little different than it did in 2025. I'm still leaning towards keeping the Delta Reserve at the $650 annual fee just because Sky Club Access has been awesome for me. There is some other awesome perks and rewards to kind of offset that cost, but that's a different video for a different day. I would have some type of Delta card regardless of, that, just because it is my preferred airline. If I do go towards more American in the future, I do have 2 American Airlines cards right now because I was sign up bonus hunting, but maybe I keep one of those in the long term if American becomes my new main airline. For my daily spend, I do have the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the Chase Ink Cash, mostly so I can transfer those points over to Hyatt. Now, those cards on the surface might not be the best everyday spend cards. They don't hit every single category, but I do tend to buy Amazon gift cards with my Chase Ink Cash to get 5x on those at Target. And I also do that for some other things as well. I do have my IHG business card that is a decent enough catch-all card. It gets me 3x IHG points, and I can get some good 0.8 cent per point offers using my IHG points. If I do some cherry picking, which is the whole point of the game, I do some cherry picking there. It also gets me 5x gas. So while those 2 cards are not going to cover all of my daily spend, I do want to put as many points towards Hyatt as possible just because I like cheap hotels and Category 2 Hyatts are the love of my life. I also have the Bilt card to get a ton of points on my rent bill, which normally gets me about 2,500 points every month. Again, all of those points go to Hyatt. There is a shout that Alaska should be the path, but that's something I can consider in the future as well. So those are kind of most of my main spend categories. Some people will say, Kirby, there's no catch-all card. Kirby, what about gas? What about grocery? Well, I do have the Capital One Duo as a backup. I have the poor man's version because I have the Venture and not the Venture X, but the Capital One Duo, again, it can kind of fit in where needed. I'm not too sure if that will be my plan forever. Again, there are some other cards that I would like to add that might fit that more daily setup, but while I'm in my sign-up bonus hunting phase, I want to get as many points as possible for a very busy 2026 worth of travel, and once they start denying me cards, I can then go back and maybe patch up with one card or two the rest of my setup. But I'm alright with this as my base credit card setup. There are some other cards that I do have, like the US Bank Smartly card, which currently gives me 2.5% cash back on everything. So again, if I wanted it more of a cashback setup, I do have a US Bank Smartly checking account and savings account, so that could work if I decided to do more cashback in the future. So now that I've given you all of this preamble, what I like to do, some questions you need to consider for yourself. Okay, you want to know what is the right credit card setup for you? And in this video, I cannot give you that answer. I can point you in the right direction, but it truly depends on who you are as a person. Where do you live? Where is your home airport? Do you live at a big airport like LAX where you can pick whatever airline you want? You can fly internationally anywhere from that one spot, or do you have more of a smaller airport like Des Moines, Iowa, let's just say, where maybe, I don't know, Delta is the biggest carrier there, or Southwest is the biggest carrier, but you hate flying Southwest, so you're kind of a free agent and you're willing to go anywhere. I'm not too sure what the Des Moines airport looks like and what kind of carriers fly out of there, but it all depends on where you live. That is the most important thing, because that will determine whether or not you have brand loyalty to someone or if you're more of a free agent. The next thing to consider is if you do travel, what kind of hotels are you willing to stay at? Do you need to stay at the Kimpton Seafire Resort in the Grand Caymans, or are you okay sleeping at a Super 8 for a night just because you're on a long road trip and you need someplace to sleep for 6 hours? Again, those are two completely different things, and that will determine what kind of credit cards you do go for. So at a very high level, if you have loyalty to any of these issuers, I can kind of at least point you in the right direction. So if you're a Delta loyalist, get Amex cards and maybe a Delta co-brand. If you're a Hilton loyalist, also Amex co-brand. If you're an American loyalist, Citi co-brand. If you're a Hyatt loyalist or United loyalist, Chase co-brand. Now, not all co-brands are created equally, and sometimes co-brands will work and sometimes they won't, even if you have 100% loyalty. If you're one of these major brands and you have loyalty to them, the first place to look at is, Amex, Citi, Chase, Capital One has some issuers as well. You would just want to determine if you do have loyalty already, look here first. If you don't have loyalty, or you might have loyalty in the future, but you haven't, flown them enough yet to know, all right, let's take another step. Also, if you are someone who just wants to fly international business class, you can kind of do that with a little bit of everyone. So there's no specific credit card issuer that you probably need to stay with. If you really like Japan and you want to fly ANA to Tokyo Narita, okay, maybe Amex is best for you. I don't know, that's just a random example. Another thing to consider is, are you paid to play? Are you someone that is conscious of annual fees? Now, if you want simplicity and no annual fees, you can get a great setup with Wells Fargo. They have a 2x Everywhere card. They have the Autograph, which gives you some nice transfer partners for no annual fee, which is kind of the only card really out there that does that. Again, there you can build a nice Wells Fargo setup, with the Wells Fargo Attune, get some nice 4x on some decent categories, and kind of more of a lifestyle card there. You can get a ton of Wells Fargo points while paying no annual fee. Now, Wells Fargo doesn't have the best transfer partners out there, and they might not work for you. But if Wells Fargo's transfer partners work for you, and you don't really want to pay annual fees on your credit card, that could be your setup right there. Just some Wells Fargo cards and you are all set. Now, if you're someone who cares about different perks and statuses and you want really good lounge access and you don't mind paying high annual fees, well, Amex is basically right there for you. Get an Amex Platinum card, get an Amex Gold card, maybe get a Blue Business Plus, or maybe find some other 2x Everywhere card, and then bang, there is your setup for Amex. Now, I've kind of noticed that the best setup for most people is a combination of two issuers and maybe just one high annual fee premium luxury travel card. Again, that's not everyone, but normally Amex is a piece of the system and not the entire system for most people. Now, the next thing is maybe you just want simplicity, like maybe 2 cards or 3 cards, but you also want lounge access and you aren't willing to pay annual fees on a ton of cards, but you're okay spending an annual fee on 1 card. Well, the Capital One duo of the Capital One Saver card and the Venture X might be a great 1-2 combo for you. You get 3x on a ton of categories, 2x everywhere else. $395 annual fee. You get good lounge access. Not the best out there, but again, especially if you are based in somewhere like Dallas-Fort Worth, again, the Capital One Lounge is right there for you, and it might be the best setup for you. Again, if you're just hunting sign-up bonuses, Amex does hand out a ton of welcome bonuses for a ton of points. And while they say you can only get a welcome bonus once, there are a ton of ways once you get into the game to kind of churn some Amex cards, especially on the business side. You can get hundreds of thousands of points every few months if you have the kind of spend for the Amex business cards. Now, what if you want your banking, your investing, and your credit cards all in one place? Well, then I'd actually recommend Chase. They are the biggest bank in America. They might even be the biggest bank in the world, to be honest. And you can have your bank account. I think you could also have some investment accounts, and you can have your credit cards all in one place. And if you just want one app for everything, I'd recommend Chase. You might be saying yes to this, no to that, but also yes to this. You might be able to run a great Chase and Capital One combo. That's kind of what I'm doing at the moment if I weren't sign-up bonus hunting. Or maybe an Amex and a Wells Fargo just setup just works perfectly for you for some reason. There is a way to kind of pick and choose here, but you also want to kind of determine what setups don't work for you first and kind of maybe not ignore them, but just prioritize other setups first. It's a high-level way of thinking at things, but I want to get your gears turning to kind of determine, okay, I don't want to pay high annual fees, so let's not even have Amex in my brain right now. Let's look at somewhere else like a Wells Fargo that has some really good no annual fee cards. So as I said, there are a ton of ways to look at the credit card game, and it can get very confusing. There are a ton of cards out there. These credit card issuers are really good at marketing. They will send you mailers. You'll start seeing little banner ads on top of websites telling you to start applying for credit cards, and you might fall into the trap of getting, okay, I'm going to get a Wells Fargo card. Okay, then I'm going to get one Chase card. And I'm going to get one Amex card. And then you have all of these points and no good place to pool them, and you don't have enough points to do anything. So we don't want to get there. So the first thing you need to do is, again, figure out who you are as a traveler, even if you are not one. Sometimes that does mean you have to take a few trips to kind of determine what you like and what you don't like. If you're okay staying at a Days Inn, okay, you can pay cash for those hotels. I think that's a Wyndham property. You can start getting some Wyndham points, and you'll be rocking it there, spending something like $86 a night on a side of the road hotel because you are driving to where you want to go, and you're going to have a great time at a more luxury place once you get there. Hey, that's totally fine. But you also might learn, like, hey, you know what? Days Inn, that's not for me. I'm looking for something a little nicer, something that has a free breakfast, and the Holiday Inn is gonna be what you consider luxury and what you consider nice, and maybe that puts you more into IHG, or maybe you're actually someone that wants to stay at a Park Hyatt because you want total luxury, Park Hyatt Kyoto all the way. I'm gonna spend thousands of dollars in cash on that. Maybe that's who you are, and that's also totally okay. You just need to travel a little bit and figure out what you like and what you don't like, and then that can then guide what credit cards you get and what points you go after. You need to ask yourself, does this card work for me before you apply? Based upon your spending habits, based upon what kind of points you want, some cards may seem great on its surface, but once you start digging into it, maybe it's an annual fee card that has credits that really don't work for you. And the Amex Gold card, again, is one of those cards that can generate a ton of points for some people. But for someone like me, while I am interested in the card and I can make it work, I don't think I want to do the work to make that card work for me right now. Now, again, they might offer me a 100,000 point sign-up bonus, and I'll rock it for a year just to test it out because that 100,000 points will definitely offset any annual fee. When it becomes to year 2, I can then reevaluate and determine how that card worked for me in the year. And sometimes it's okay test driving a card for a year and then canceling it. If you got a good welcome bonus, try the card out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's some hidden superpowers about the card you didn't know it had until you get it. That's totally okay as well. But the number one thing we don't want to do is overspend on annual fees for cards we don't use. If you pay an annual fee for a credit card, it should serve a purpose, whether that give you a free night certificate like with my IHG business card or my lounge access with my Delta Reserve. That's $650 a year. And while there are some other credits to offset that fee a little bit, even if I'm not putting a ton of spend on that card, it still serves a purpose in my setup. Another thing to highlight is that not all co-branded cards are created equal. Now, if you are a loyalist to a certain brand, whether that be airline or hotel, they probably have a credit card associated with that. Now, I do think the Hilton credit cards, the Delta cards, the IHG cards, they are great, solid cards. Not all issuers have great credit cards. A lot of times airline cards have very bad multipliers and they're supposed to be offsetting that annual fee that they have with different perks, but sometimes those perks require a ton of spend on the card and they might not be great for you. So you got to make sure that just because you love United doesn't mean you should definitely get a United credit card. There are certain things you need to consider, like how often am I flying United? Is it only once or twice a year? You can probably just skip it. If you're flying United once a month for work, all right, take a look at those United cards. They might work better for you. Just to say, not all co-brands are created equal. There are some really bad ones out there for smaller brands that you might not even realize have a credit card. So just be careful before you just apply for co-brands because you like the brand. Then as I said again, create a plan, do not overspend. It is very easy to overspend when hitting a welcome offer. It's like, okay, I can spend $4,000 in 3 months to hit this credit card welcome bonus. Well, boom, they have a welcome bonus that is an actual 50,000 points. You're going to get 100,000 points to get the sign up bonus, but now you have to spend $8,000 in 3 months instead of 4,000. Okay, while that offer might sound awesome, you got to make sure that you have the natural spend to hit it. Now there are things you can do, like maybe you can prepay rent, or you have a giant, car insurance payment coming up like I did recently, or you can kind of time a higher spend welcome offer around some higher spend events, especially around tax time. That's what you'll see a lot of YouTubers say is like, get the Amex Business Platinum around tax time because instead of paying every paycheck, they pay quarterly taxes, so they can pay that big tax bill all at once. So depending on what your job is, that is also a nice little strategy. But you don't want to overspend on a credit card just to get points. That'll always give you a negative ROI. You want to make sure you are still being financially responsible when applying for these credit cards. There are some welcome bonuses that have come by that I would have loved to get, but I just didn't have the spend to get them, so I decided to pass. And it hurts, but at the end of the day, it's just Monopoly money. And while that Monopoly money can lead to some awesome vacations, there will always be another welcome bonus to hit, and there will always be another credit card that comes out and changes the game every few years. So it is okay to take it a little bit slower than you see some other people on YouTube. I have done a very hard and fast 2025, but I do not think I will go as hard or as fast as I did in 2026. It is okay to only apply for 1 or 2 cards a year, especially if you know you won't be traveling as much that year. So even after all of that, you might feel a little overwhelmed, and that's okay because it takes time to figure all of this out. This is a fun hobby and it is a fun game to play, but it can be overwhelming at times. Sometimes it's okay to just say, I am done getting new credit cards. I'm just going to use what I have for a few months or even a few years and just rock this and get my points as they come. And that is a totally fine strategy. You should have a plan to put that spend on certain cards that will then give you the best benefits for you possible, not what anyone else says. But that is something that you will figure out as you figure out what kind of cards you like, what kind of issuers you like. You might be a big fan of American, but if you had bad experiences with Citibank in the past, again, they don't have the best reputation for good customer service, you might just say, you know what, I might like flying American, but I'm not going to deal with them. And that's totally okay. You need to figure out what issuers that you had good relationships with, that you've had good experiences with, and just rock those out. You do not need to figure out a way to get to the Maldives on business class for free and getting a free hotel and getting everything free to win the game. All you need to do to win the game is just to discount your travel every once in a while. Or again, even if you aren't a traveler, just get a nice little extra cash back so you can put your Black Friday shopping all on your cash back, and next thing you know, your bank account didn't change a single dime. That is a win in my book as well. So I hope this video was a way for some of you to kind of wade through all of the noise in the credit card YouTube community. There's a lot of awesome people who are willing to help you, but sometimes that information can be a little overwhelming. Hopefully this video serves as a way for you to kind of stop, think about some of these questions, and that can kind of point you in the right direction. You can also, again, just kind of look at the credit cards you have now, look at the travel you want to do, and figure out, okay, if I want to go to this hotel or this place and fly here, what points do I need to get there? Start there, work backwards, and I think you'll have a ton of success. If you liked this video and made it all the way to the end, I just want to thank you for that. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year. Definitely a tall ask and probably won't happen, but I've seen a lot of awesome love lately, so I just want to thank you all for that. And if you would like to support the channel in any way, there are some referral links in the description below for some of the cards I have. If you are looking for a new credit card, it could be nice of you to just kind of check my links to see if the card you're looking at getting is one of the cards that I have, would be kind of nice, but definitely not a requirement at all. Just a subscribe and a like would do more than wonders. And most importantly, have a great rest of your day.